Hello and welcome to the Build Better Homes podcast. I'm your host, Royal Mortier, and with me, my trusty sidekick, Mr. John O'Shea. How are you today, sir?
I'm doing great. How are you?
You just do like a little binky in the...
Yeah.
Oh, I wasn't sure if you did 6 guns or like a binky in the brain.
Well, yeah. Your voice is like perfect for this type of thing. So you've really got it down and so I was like, wow.
Sunday.
Here we go. Ready, folks. I was pretty sad when I heard Bruce Buffer's no longer around. That was a tough one for me because he's been part of the UFC and announcing fights for a really long time. I think he's got a twin brother that does the same thing, but those guys have some good voices too. But yeah, I did the 6-shooter back into the holsters. Here I am ready to go. Let's do it.
Okay. Well, first off, you just start off the podcast by dropping a bomb that Bruce Buffer isn't with the announcing for UFC anymore. I did not know that.
He actually passed, dude. I'm pretty sure. Or he has some kind of he had something happen that was very quickly, and I think he passed away. So RIP Bruce Buffer. Isn't that sad?
What are you talking about? I'm not seeing anything that says that.
Really? I'm pretty sure I saw it.
No, it says will not retire till UFC 400.
Oh,
we're only
Dude, it was one of those things then, you know what? You can't trust what you see on the internet then. You're probably the first person I've even mentioned that to, and I was super sad when I saw that. Oh, that's good news. Go Bruce Buffer. Keep doing it, buddy, to 400 with Paramount and everybody. Yeah. Let's go.
Yeah, it says he plans to continue for many more years to UFC 400. Yeah.
Good news.
Yeah. He's 68 years old. First time I'm like, yeah, you hit me with a bomb like that. I'm like, I hadn't heard about that. I follow UFC pretty closely. So, all right. His brother does similar stuff too. His brother has a very noticeable voice and has his own taglines and his intro type stuff. Yeah. We're digressing here, but I've been told before, my voice definitely carries. And being prior military, the jokes would always be like, go from casual talking Royal to drill sergeant Royal at the flip of a switch. And I never went the drill sergeant route or anything in regards to that. Much respect to those guys, but I guess I was born with the voice for it if I would have wanted to go that route.
I noticed my voice changed when I talk to my kids. I have like a dad voice. Yeah. And it gets deeper and louder, especially because they're young, probably. Yeah. And I'm trying to communicate with them and they're trying to learn how to communicate. But I definitely have a dad voice, but you have the better radio voice.
There we go. Yeah, I have the perfect face for radio, as my mom used to tell me. Yes. Perfect face for radio. All right. Well, actually, I'm really excited about today's topic because this one actually was a request. We got messages on Facebook Messenger asking about this, and this is something that's pretty cool. We've been able to be a part of some projects with it, either with PLIRIS or with my prior companies. I know some developers that have used it, some residential builders that have used it, and then we also had a whole totally separate podcast that dealt with this, in which we interviewed a gentleman that was a part of this industry. And that is manufactured construction. And so we'll kind of dive head right first into it. But basically, I don't want people to consider manufactured construction and what they typically consider manufactured homes. So manufactured homes, those are what you guys probably immediately envision when I say manufactured construction. Manufactured homes are something very different. Well, they're different and they're the same, right? So just like every rectangle every square is a rectangle, but not every rectangle is a square. So manufactured homes, pretty common place where you see manufactured home parks, or you can have a manufactured home trucked out and put on your property. The single wide, double wide, I live in Florida. Everybody immediately envisions the Florida man if we correlate Florida and manufactured homes. But manufactured homes, the requirements for manufactured homes have vastly improved over the years. Manufactured homes are now really set to the same building codes and guidelines that new residential construction are. But what's allowed an expansion and really almost a development of an entire new product and process is manufactured construction as a whole, and in which you can actually pre-produce or use a controlled environment, a manufactured environment for construction of larger scale residential in even multifamily and even commercial. It's a pretty cool process overall.
Well, I know we've talked to developers and contractors. Some swear by it. Others say they'll never touch it again. I know that in my past lives, I have built homes, stick-built homes on site-built foundations that right next to me was they manufacture in a warehouse and then they put it on the truck and then they ship the wall segments, let's say, out to the job site. They manufacture the walls in a warehouse and bring it out and then set everything with a crane versus the stick built across the street where you're getting random lengths, maybe some pre-cut studs, maybe like a value cut package from a company that maybe sets all your plates and your studs and cuts all your headers to length and lays the plates out. I don't know if that would be considered manufactured construction because there's that like speed frame type of thing going on with stick built. But then right next door is a company that built it all in a warehouse, shipped it out, and set it all with cranes. And there's pros and cons to each. And some builders love it because their on-site production time is shorter. And some don't like it at all because if there's even a slight variance out on site, you aren't necessarily able to adjust for that. Or if something's incorrect, it can have a cascading effect all the way down the line of what you have. So there's pros and cons to each. So
right. Yeah. And there's levels to it, right? So what you're talking about, the speed pack, I think I've heard it called, there's other names I've heard it called, where they basically, everything comes out to the job site already pre-cut, and then studs or framework is basically tattooed, right?
Yeah, it's stamped on the plant. It's like stamped on the actual wood, almost like a building kit. Like it tells you where it all goes.
Your framing is now by Lincoln log direction and versus having to have the more skilled labor and precision of the framer stuff. Now everything comes in, the boards are literally tattooed with what stud number goes where. They have the lineup lines right there. So your framer's not even busting out a speed square. So that's more of like a pre-cut lumber package. Then there's another level, which is your pre-assembled paneling. Mm-hmm. And with the pre-assembled paneling, like with our podcast we did with Bot Built, everything's coming out in pre-manufactured wall panels. Very much different than what we have with pre-manufactured trusses, right? And trusses have existed for decades. We've inspected and I've assessed field built or manufactured trusses that dated all the way back into the 50s and 60s.
I was just going to say 50s and 60s. I think 40s is where they were doing those compression roofs and they were framing them on site. Mm-hmm. And then it seemed like they came out 50s, 60s in remodels I did. That's about when I started seeing the plate or the plywood gussets that put everything together.
The plywood gussets being a big one. And then you got, then you're getting into the metal, the metal plates. And then the codes have aligned and changed where there's a ton of benefit when you are getting into the manufacturing. Now, most of that manufactured environment, you can get increases in your wood values because they're accounting for the fact that you're going to have much tighter tolerances in the production. They benefit you in the wood design code. When you're in a manufactured environment, there's additional increases that you get to take. And not to mention when you're in a manufactured environment, you're in a controlled environment. So in situations and places where maybe your good weather season for building is limited, that's where this is something that is highly beneficial. So, there's the manufactured wall panels, very much similar to the pre-manufactured trusses. And then you can get into manufactured rooms. I worked on a hospital project where literally we had all of our bathrooms essentially pre-manufactured. And as we finished out a floor, we craned them into place. So all the plumbing, all the electrical, all the tile, all the fixtures, you had to have a roll in because it was in a hospital. Everything had to be curbless. So we had already accounted for that and how we formed the concrete. And then you were able to just come in and drop this bathroom right into place and then start forming and pouring the next floor up. So it was very time efficient. But then we also get into the actual case of a full manufactured building section assembly, where I've seen as small as there's actually near where you live outside of Salem, there is a company that pre-manufactures residential, multifamily, and commercial building assemblies. And they're actually pretty slick. And you bring it together and they put it together like a Tetris, 3D Tetris. The biggest one that I've seen thus far, again, actually in Oregon, there's an entire apartment complex in Bend. If those of you in Bend are familiar with Bend, there's a brewery called Worthy Brewing, and there's an apartment complex that kind of U-shapes around Worthy Brewing. That was all done pre-manufactured. Bend has 6 months of snow.
Yeah.
So this was a developer that wanted to get in, get the apartment complexes put in as quickly as possible to a dry in state. So that way, when the snow when the snow and the cold hit, they were either working the interior or the units were already rentable. And I can't remember exactly how many segments that whole apartment complex turned into, but that was actually pre-manufactured by a company in the Midwest and then trucked in with, I want to say it was over 300 different segments. So pretty significant. So there's your kind of levels of tiers to it. But as we talk with developers or we meet with builders on this, and there's the discussion of the different types of manufacturing they could bring into place in it, the number one thing that comes into factor is just speed. Really, I mean, that's something that builders are constantly looking for is, we run into it all the time with what we're doing the engineering or doing the plan design is how quickly can you get this to me? And so that's very much the same thing when it comes to this manufactured level.
Yeah, I talked to a multifamily developer last year, and it saved them almost 4 months on a 200 unit project. So it was basically being built in parallel with the foundations. So it saved them a ton of time, and similar to probably what you're talking about. And we'll go a little further into the speed part of it. But what I wanted to say too, before we move on from just kind of the overview, there's also like another level, which is tiny homes, which are completely shipped on a truck that are 100% just drop it on the foundation and hook up the water and the sewer. And then there's also like people building homes out of storage containers now. That is like super trendy. That's something that 20, 30 years ago, I worked for a builder who was shipping like ag housing. They would stuff a container full of all the stuff that goes into an ag building for ag workers, and they would ship it out, and they would, build all of these units out of these storage containers. Well, now they're actually using the storage containers to stack and kind of do a modular thing like what you were talking about. And that's got to be super fast.
Well, in your tiny homes comment does kind of correlate to what we were discussing, or what I was discussing a couple episodes ago with the ADUs. And those you can just order. And at my prior firm, we were actually working with a manufacturing company that was looking basically at just ready to order out of a catalog your own pre-manufactured ADU or tiny home. And basically the only big difference there was an ADU was going to be brought in, dropped on an actual permanent foundation, and a tiny home was basically going to be put on a trailer bed. And there wasn't any real difference to them. It was just what they were getting attached to. So those are pretty slick setups.
Wasn't Sears shipping homes for like $1,000 or $1,500 in the 50s? Like, they were literally, if you look at an old Sears catalog, I'm pretty sure that my father-in-law has some of these catalogs at his house, and you could like choose your little tiny home, and I don't think they were site built. I think they were shipping those little things out, but I might be mistaken. I'll have to look.
It was the package. So they were literally, they would send you out everything for the framing, and then they'd send you out for everything for the floors and interior finishes.
So they weren't put together. Yeah.
Right. So, but then you hit on the shipping container stuff, which is a whole nother realm. And the shipping containers are pretty slick because they basically they're just a big steel box.
Yeah.
And when you get a lot of structural capacity throughout that system, the perimeter frame is actually holding a significant, the majority of the forces being imposed on those boxes. And
they're designed to be stacked too, right?
Right. They're designed to be stacked. And so you can cut the holes for your door openings and stuff as you see fit. And then you can just have your frame things out and finish them out as you want. And it's pretty slick. The only difficulty that we've ever seen with them is I did work on one project where they had built the whole thing, but then they didn't account for what they were going to need for actual roof topping. And it ended up being what they wanted to get the aesthetic. They basically had to have pre-manufactured trusses. So then we had to come in essentially after they thought they were already done with their system. And they unfortunately had to remove quite a bit of their exterior facade and other stuff they did, so that way we could weld in brackets to then affix roof trusses. So that's more of a planning. They improperly planned in the process, but it did work out pretty slick. And I mean, I don't know cost or time savings in those things, but I would be interested to have somebody on the show that actually is more experienced with using containers for some form of housing, because there's got to be, I mean, there's a lot of people just DIYing it, but there are some people, I believe, based on some of the extravagancy of some of these that I've seen, there's got to be somebody that's actually doing this as a business.
Yeah.
So
going back to the speed portion of it in the modular side of things, you know, as if you were to put a stick frame house, let's talk about the panelization versus like modular segmentation and setting. I think our industry as a whole kind of moves like a snail. Home building is super slow to adopt new technology. This is something that I feel like has been around for a very long time. The panelization conversation, obviously manufactured homes, you hit on that. That's been doing that for a while, but single family, multifamily, there are builders that are on the cutting edge that are doing that, but it's not as widely adopted in the Northwest. You can speak to Florida, but there are builders, national builders that are around here, even international builders that are now building here in the States that are using this high level of sophistication in order to speed up their construction process. And if you drive by their houses, you would never even know that those were not like a stick built standard random lengths house. It looks exactly the same as the stick built house. And the time frame, you know, they land a crane, they can line up 3 or 4 single family homes, and they're bringing trucks in and off stacking those, and the gradall's picking them up, and the crane's moving things into place. And I'm not a professional modular or panelization builder. However, I believe that cut the time down by at least 20 to 30%, if not more, from a standard stick build. Now there's some really fast crews out there that are doing the more traditional type of build, and on different complex sites that might be a little bit easier when there's a lot of jogs and grade and things that make a site complicated, and maybe rougher foundations that aren't perfect or things out of square or plumb. Maybe it's easier to do a standard stick built, but from what I saw, it was pretty slick and very efficient. And so I think there's a huge nod to the speed. You know, time is money, right? That's a saying that everybody says. And if the quality is there or better, then that technology is here to stay and will be adopted as technology in general advances. That's my opinion on the speed.
What I thought was interesting, because I've actually got to tour these manufacturing plants, is the level of precision that everything is set at.
Yeah.
Because they basically, you know, they have a maximum size that they can build these things at, right? And instead of, we're going to set the form work, we got to, you know, granted, precision in construction has become a lot more advanced with the use of lasers and other stuff like that, that are more readily accessible to these framers and people doing foundations. But one of the things I can say when I remember going in these manufacturing plants is they basically have these jigs that are preset and lasered in on the concrete slabs of these manufacturing plants that then they can just adjust, and those jigs are precision set. So there's not, I mean, we're talking millimeters of tolerance.
They're big tables with rollers with clamps on them, right? That kind of adjust, and we'll show the team what they need to cut and put in, and some robotics involved in that too.
Right. There's a lot of robotics involved, and I mean, precision level stuff. And I mean, like in the case of Bot Built with their pre-manufactured panels, you know, they're buying these auto assembly robots that are out of calibration. Well, what they mean by out of calibration is, you know, like these auto assembly robots are literally
0.001 of an inch.
Right. Oh, it's ridiculous. These auto assembly robots, when they're out of calibration we're talking fractions of a millimeter, they kick them out, and then they're able to pick them up on pennies on the dollar. So, which fractions of a millimeter is far greater precision than anything that we're working with in the field with a lot of stuff. So it is pretty insane the level of precision these get at. And then the time aspect of it, you're not going to notice it. And that's the whole point of it. Or you should know, or maybe you do notice it because the quality and the precision and alignment of everything is so much better. And that's a big thing. It is really interesting in those aspects. Now, when it comes to, does it actually make the overall construction any less costly, or is it any cheaper? That's by opinion, right?
I think that's controversial because cost of capital, barriers to entry in the market.
Yeah.
Coming from a macro lens, I guess there's some barriers to getting started with panelization and modularization, if that's a word.
Right. Yeah. And I've heard contractors say, well, it didn't work out cheaper per unit for me. Well, kind of along the lines of with anything is, yeah, as you've stated, that cost of entry, because I'm going to have to take my plan and have the investment of getting it into a panelized design or have the engineering adjusted so it can be manufactured, and there's limitations on how wide and how long they can ship those segments. So then the plan has to either be adjusted or re-engineered or redesigned to confine into those boxes of what they can ship. And but then you go from there. So it is a point of discussion. It is a point of discussion. So, but when you take that cost and you spread it not across maybe 1 unit, 2 units, but say 100, 150 units per year, and you're saving weeks in construction for each unit.
That contribution margin starts going down.
Right. And then there's other things that, start to reduce down maybe your warranty items, your punch list items, those kinds of things, because everything is being dealt with in precision and becoming part of a QC checklist by the manufacturer before it even comes out to the job site.
In a more controlled environment, less variables, the weather, all kinds of things that you're in that controlled environment. So you have to do some weighing out of what, how many units, and then put it across all those and see what you come up with. So
right.
What about is panelization, modularization? Again, I don't know if that's a word, but I'm going to use it on this podcast. Is that something that people can do a lot of different designs with? Or, I wonder how crazy you can get with your designs.
So I've seen them get pretty out there, but I mean, design pushback comes up a lot. Are we looking more of this in a standard box type unit? Right. With the production model, or can we have it to where that people still have the options that they're looking for?
I would think that they could. I mean, like I said, from a curb appeal standpoint, the homes look virtually the same as the stick built ones. And if your plans, like our plans, have options on them, then that can just kind of be taken into account when designing the panelization design. And it seems like you can just change the wall segments or change the floor segments or do jogs and bump outs and cantilevers and things like options and changing, I guess, building massing and articulation that sometimes costs more money in general, whether it's stick built or not. That's why production builders tend to build in boxes versus articulations and having different massing. But it seems like the level of sophistication we have with technology, it seems like at least the panelized homes that I've seen are just as architecturally diverse and appealing as the stick-built ones.
And with the panelization, it doesn't really affect much. And minor modifications, say changing a window size, adding a window, those kind of options are something that either could be integrated in as a field retrofit, or if there is enough time where it's requested ahead of time, they can integrate those in. There was one builder that I met with that used this, and he had a very interesting way of approaching it, but he did panelized construction. And his comment with that is, my clients can have whatever option they want installed in the home after we're done. And I was like, what do you mean? And he goes, we have a set timeline and schedule, and there's no changes requested that's allowed by the client from the time we start until the time we finish. We build the entire house. They get to C of O. Once the C of O is done, any changes that they wanted, we will already have a pre-built in change order, whatever, and we will come back and integrate those changes in. But the home is fully finished.
If you can toe that line and still sell your homes, then that is fantastic from an operational business perspective, as long as people are buying that. Because I worked for a builder, one of the best builders around in the Northwest, and management would consistently walk through the project at even after post sheetrock, post cabinets, and want to just make changes after changes. And they really served their customers in that regard. It was margin erosion at that point, because sometimes there was a pre-sold, sometimes it was spec, but it was a very challenging. I think I was a project manager at that point, and so it was really challenging, whether it be the customer or the management that wanted to come through and change things after certain cutoffs were happening, where it gets very complicated. Let's say after you sheetrock or after cabinets or inner floorings in, sometimes it can be really challenging to make changes. So kudos to that builder for towing the line and selling their homes. That's an awesome story.
Yeah, I think it was more, I would say it was probably more a situation of they already had a comprehensive plan library that had been vetted, was working well, was selling well. And it was maybe, again, we've talked before about, first time home buyer, second time, the tier of clientele that they were going after was very much a situation of the cost correlated to it. So they were trying to get all their cost controls in there. And one of the cost controls being time. And anytime you make a change,
we all know it,
right? It brings that whole schedule to a screeching halt. Whereas the contractor's going, hey, I've got construction loan, I've got, dates I have to meet,
closing
I've got
dates, all of that. Yeah.
Right. So the only way we're going to make this work and be cost effective is if I meet those dates, we get fully finished. And then if you want to change it, great, we'll give you a change order, but the home gets fully built, and then we'll come back in. So it's an interesting approach, but it makes sense in some aspects and with some particular kinds of clients. But they were a contractor that was using panelized construction. And that was one of the things that they also was a benefit to them with the time, and the financial benefit was, do not try and make changes to the panelized construction as things are going through the process.
So in other words, if you're going to build a home, stick built, or even especially panelized, then make your decisions up front, lock your decisions in very early. The earlier, the better. And that's true with all things, really. Yeah.
Yeah. How often do we get, it's humorous to me sometimes.
Change management's the hardest thing we do in our business, in the builder's business, in change management is so difficult, not only from a cost, but operational side of it. I mean, we have to track so many spinning plates with things that change. So it gets complex and costly.
It's always astonishing to me sometimes where it's like, hey, we want this change. And I was like, oh, well, we issued those plans like 6 months ago. So where are you at? They're like, oh, yeah, everything's already framed. I'm like, so what are you wanting to do? Like,
we want to add a wing onto the backside of the house, or we want, it's like, oh my gosh.
I think the most extreme one I ever had was we designed a 2-story hotel, and the owner decided after the foundation was already poured that he wanted it to be 3 stories.
Oh, geez. Oh my gosh.
So that one was extreme. And then of course he was like, well, I've got a construction schedule and I've got this and I've got that. And so, I mean, it was all hands on deck for a couple of weeks, adding on a 3rd floor, re-engineering everything for the 3rd floor.
Were your footings and walls good? Was everything okay?
Well, we had to, so I mean, it was a slab on grade, but I mean, we had to design retrofits. Yeah. We had to design retrofits for the foundation they poured because, I mean, you're adding an entire another floor. The loading increased and everything. So it was a little chaotic. That's one of those projects that will stick with you. And luckily, I don't live anywhere near that hotel anymore. I used to drive by it almost every day and just have horrible memories of the late nights and weekends and stuff, and the chaos of that one. But no, I don't live by it anymore, so I don't have to look at it. We can move on. So with options, with selections, with your choices, make them early, plan for them in the design phase, account for those things. It's really nice whoever's outside blowing their lawn or using their...
they're supposed to be here on Monday, but I'm not sure, but I'm pretty sure today's Friday.
Pretty sure today's Friday.
What's really funny is we'll digress for a moment here for you folks listening out there. During our production meeting on Mondays, it's 9 p.m. Pacific Standard Time and 11 for Royal. And
9 a.m.
Not p.m. Yeah. That'd be funny. But
we work through the night and we're nocturnal.
24/7. Surely enough, we moved it there so that they would not be outside the office at that time. And then they changed and altered their schedule to the same time we have our meeting and now this. So apologies for the background noise. Hopefully our wonderful social media and producer will be able to edit some of that out.
Just for people that wonder when you're coordinating podcasts, especially as we start getting in more guests, John has kids.
Yeah.
I have kids.
Yeah.
Right. They were on slightly different time zones. And then we also have guests that have all their obligations, and not to mention the outside noises. Cause I have a lawn care service as well because I like my weekends.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's just all these coordinations of, oh, we got this. Oh, we got that. Oh, I got kids getting off the bus and running in the house and going chaotic. You have kids going down for naps. And so it's like, oh, great. This is perfect. It's, oh man, the time coordination. Anybody that's like, oh, hey, I could start a podcast. It's like,
yeah, we could do a podcast about podcasting.
Right.
Like Seinfeld made a show about making a show about a comedian. We should do a podcast about podcasting.
Yes.
There's more challenges than you would think.
We call it the Seinfeld podcast.
Yeah.
That's hilarious. I like that. That's actually really funny. All right. Back to it. All right.
Yeah.
All right. So now there's items of, and I think we kind of hit on this, was quality.
Quality is where people become believers. When they get in there and they see the quality, especially like those surveys they take a year after. I built a house in 2024. February of 24, I closed, and we've been in it for 2 years. And that 1 year survey that we got is a huge one for that builder and very important because it says a lot about how we live in the house, and we've gotten closer to it. We see the things that if there are any defects, that when you walk through, when you close on a house in the beginning, you're just so happy and elated to get into that house, and you're tired from packing and moving and doing everything, closing and paying for it. Oh my gosh, it's the biggest investment anybody ever makes. Well, in most people.
Most people, yeah.
Yeah. Once you're in it a year, you really get to know that house and you see more things than you saw before. And so that's why those 1 year warranty walks. And so I would think back to that quality is where people come believers. If you're in a controlled manufacturing environment and your quality is going up because of that, that's going to show through into the product itself and through the warranty and those kinds of things all the way through client satisfaction. I mean, and the one thing with every person that I've ever worked with, it's that likely to recommend on the very end, a year later at the end of the project. Are you likely to recommend this person? I mean, there's national indexes that monitor that for all of the builders, and they compete in housing quality. And people don't realize that one thing, likely to recommend, is the strongest indicator of whether those people are happy or not as a customer, and whether you're going to get return business as a builder. So
yeah, it is. It's crazy. There's a few online or social media home inspectors. I love watching their stuff. I really do. They bring up some good things, but they do hit on the fact of sometimes they're doing the initial inspection, and now they've been doing it for long enough. They're doing the initial home inspection on a new home.
Yeah.
Right. And then they're coming back and they're doing the 1 year inspection, and nothing from that initial inspection was addressed or corrected by the 1 year, which is pretty crazy to think. And I mean, we're not talking like minor stuff. Like, I mean, in some situations it's cracked bathtubs, which why your brand new bathtub is cracked on a brand new house, right? That doesn't make any sense. There's some things, unfortunately, they just can't fix easily, which is like massive unlevelness in floor systems and stuff like that.
Yeah, humps in the floor.
The one that I'm still be able to write, where walls are so out of square, or there's just random humps in the walls that don't make any sense, where the wall just is going straight and all of a sudden just jogs randomly.
Like they didn't crown their studs.
Right.
In a manufacturing environment, they probably crown everything and cut everything straight.
Right. And so those are things, but your production quality is definitely something that people will remember. I remember we got in with one builder and we looked at their stuff and we found a lot of flaws in their design process. And then the other thing, I remember meeting with them, I was like, what's your guys' warranty log like? And at the time, they were building around 100 to 150 homes a year. And they told me they had over 300 warranty claims out.
Oh
and
my
I was like,
gosh.
and I go, well,
It's 3 years in arrears.
I go, yeah, that's over 2 years of your guys' actual home production. And they're like, well, yeah, like we're still trying to keep caught up with it, but subcontractors and this and that. And we try and look at it as your plans are the start of your process. So how can we fix it there? And I mean, that's where we tried to start, was improving the plans. But there's also digression in that the builder also established the quality at the top, and that has to trickle down. And so if a builder is looking at something of like, what is a quick way that I could address improving my quality of, say, my framing? And if I've got a small library of plans and I want to streamline this, especially if I'm living in an area where I have environmental conditions that aren't conducive to construction a lot of the year, i.e. very wet environments, right? And I'm trying to build and not have mold issues in my houses. Just the simplest integration of panelized construction. Yes, there may be a slight increase in your costs because you are paying a company to do that panelized construction for you, versus your in the field framers. And I think we discussed that before, that the price per square foot that framers have been paid hasn't increased in like decades.
Don't get me going.
Right?
I was a framing contractor with a 10-man crew for 15 years, and we got paid $3 a foot for production, and we got paid up to 15 for big 10,000 plus square foot customs. And to this day, production framers are making $5 a square foot. That is 20 years later.
Yeah.
That's a whole podcast in and of itself, as another topic about the industry in general. But that was a crazy thing to find out.
It is pretty ridiculous that we haven't had that increase. Instead, what they found is they found ways, right, to cut on materials, to speed up the pre-cuts and everything like that. So they're trying to increase that, but I think we're going to get to a point here, or we are getting into a point where something's got to give. But the integration of pre-manufactured paneling, the panelization system, is a quick way and pretty simple way that builders can improve their production, reduce production times, reduce some costs, and increase on what I would consider overall quality, at least for the framing aspects of itself. And then if you're going to do that production panelization, you got to tighten things up with your foundation, because no longer is it a situation of, oh, my framer can just feather the walls and do those things, to account for the fact the foundation was poured slightly out of
the walls are nailed off. So there's nothing you're going to do.
Right. You're not doing any of that. Everything has to be much tighter in it. And so when you set something as a very high level of precision, everything else kind of has to trickle into place. So there's something to think about.
Well, what doesn't work with panelization? Because we talked about the pros. Mm-hmm. That's a perfect segue into the cons.
Right.
Industry resistance. So I'll give an example. The advanced framing versus intermediate framing. There's reasons to do both.
Right.
However, there's cons to doing, even though advanced framing, for those of you that are familiar or not familiar with it, everything, and I'm sure the engineer in Royal will correct me if I don't get it quite right, but it's direct bearing. Everything's in alignment. So your trusses are in line with your wall studs are in line with your floor framing's in line with whatever it's bearing on below it. And so you can space things differently, and there's less thermal transfer from an energy code standpoint. There's less wood in the walls, and there's more insulation, i.e. a little bit different wall assembly than 16 on center, 24 on center floor, 24 on center trusses. So with that, just kind of bringing that home, is if you apply a lap siding with a 1/2 inch or 7/16 OSB, there's concavity and convexity to, if those are the right words, as you get between the studs. I'm not even sure convexity is a word. That's the second time in this podcast I've done it. So
you're just trying to Jordan Peterson up the podcast.
Right. Did you know no, I'm just kidding. Did you know my background? Between the studs, there can be deflection. Let's put it that way. That's much easier to say.
Okay.
And so lap siding can run in and out, like it's flat from stud to stud, but then it dips in between the studs, let's say. And that happens a lot on gable end trusses where the studs are flat. You see this waviness in there. So for years, the conversation every time as a design professional, I get involved with purchasing is purchasing says, well, we want to do advanced framing. Not only does it perform better from a thermal mechanics standpoint, it also is less wood. But then the design side and the aesthetic side is, well, I don't want to see all these waves in my walls. And 16 on center is less wavy, let's say. So there has to be some downsides, to your point, Royal, on like if you don't get that precision foundation. I'm trying to think of what are some other downsides. If there's a mistake in the design process, like let's say this wall is supposed to be 10 feet, but the factory cuts it 5 feet or, 8 feet. And then you get it out there and you don't have the right stuff.
Right.
Then do you have to go back to the factory and get that wall rebuilt, or does it become a site built practice to scab that together? And is that the right way of doing that? And so just to kind of start that conversation off, there has to be some downsides, maybe timing of shipping and all of that. I don't know.
Yeah, I think you're hitting on some key things. Obviously, in the manufactured environment or panelization versus manufacturing, there is a QC, there's making sure everything's right ahead of time. But that applies with anything. We've worked with a lot of pre-engineered steel structures, and pre-engineered steel structures, everything has to be locked in. I mean, we worked on one situation where they didn't allow any changes a year before delivery. It was such a significant building.
That's crazy.
Right. And you would think about it, you're like, oh, well, I'm only ordering a steel structure, not a big deal. But in this situation with its intricacies of its frames, and we had a mezzanine and we had multiple levels of walls and other stuff like that, the level of complexities and everything really drove it up to where they said everything has to be locked in a year before delivery, because that's just where it was at in their production schedule. And a lot of pre-engineered steel buildings, I mean, even the steel beams themselves are rolled by the manufacturer, meaning that it's not a conventional size steel beam. It's
not easy to get or make,
right,
or whatever.
They have sections of plate steel that they're then fabricating and welding together in their factory. And so if you're going to go, oh, I'm going to make changes to this, make changes to that may incur changes to loading, may incur changes to the steel frame. They just don't want to have it. They don't want to have it. They don't want to have anything that's going to hold up their production line. So you are in this situation of you are dealing with a production line, not just a situation of, oh, I'm 3 studs short. Let me run down to the home improvement store, grab 3 studs and get this taken care of, right? So in every situation, you have to consider that in the panelized environment. In the pre-manufactured environment, everything's coming out to you done, right? Yeah. So that's the intent of it. So really where I've seen the flaws in that is a situation where they tried to cut corners on the foundation, or how they were lining things up, or precision on those aspects of it, which you can account for. You can make adjustments. You can field retrofit in most situations with foundations. But yeah, in a panelized environment, if you were to be short on a panel or something like that, then you need to account for it. Where it comes into more in the situation is definitely the shipping or timeline and coordination. Because you don't want to pour a concrete foundation and have it sit for weeks while you're waiting for everything to show up, right? You're trying to precision out your timeline and your schedule. And in a manufacturing and a shipping environment, right, they're pretty tight on their schedule. So if your concrete crews run late or anything prep-wise gets delayed, that building's getting dropped. Right?
Yeah.
Those segments of building are getting dropped, whether you're ready for them or not.
That reminds me of early on in my career, I had framed houses quicker. I had missed the dates. I had been quicker than it was to the truss date. The trusses get delivered, by crane by the manufacturer. And so we had gone faster on a couple homes than we thought we would. So we took off and went to the next job. Well, somehow we missed the truss delivery date. And now I think they'll drop them plate side, maybe some trusses, but they dropped the entire bunk of 2 houses of trusses in the driveway. And we had to figure that out. After they did that, we had to figure out how to get them all up on the roof. And that kind of spurred me buying my first telescoping forklift when I was a framing contractor. But that's what did it. We're not going to be able to get those 40 or 50 foot, girder trusses, those dual 2 or 3 layer girder trusses up there. So we're going to have to do something. But
that's why you hire a bunch of high schoolers.
Yeah, exactly. But on another note, I wanted to go back to the advanced framing, intermediate framing thing, because perception. What I faced was from a customer, well, why does this house have 24-inch on center studs and this house has 16? Like, why are you putting less wood in there? You're cutting corners. So industry perception with panelization or modular building that might be a thing too, is like people's perception, even people within the industry, like old timers. Well, I don't like this modular building,
Right.
it doesn't work. You got to build it custom. There's that stigma of, oh, is this a custom or is this production? That type of thing. And then some people have stigmas around all of that. And so I think perception would play into that as well. So.
Yeah, and it's funny that you hit on this. So I want to clarify something, because we work in a lot of states, and we work in certain states that require 2x6 framing, but people need to understand that 2x6 framing is required or more commonplace not because of structural requirements, but of insulation requirements. Yeah. The majority of the country actually frames in 2x4 construction because we have different insulation requirements. So we're not cutting corners when you're doing 2x4 versus 2x6. It's a situation of that isn't necessarily required. 2x4 to 2x6 structurally isn't a significant difference. You're in a situation
from a vertical loading standpoint,
from a vertical and even lateral.
And in lateral,
right?
Yeah, true.
Yep.
Yeah.
So it's out of plane. So if you start to go very tall in your walls, then you need that additional depth. Yeah. Or if you're in a situation of very high wind loading, or if it's just an overall quality of construction that they're looking for. So, we've had situations, 2x4, conventionally, you can go up to a 14-foot wall in typical wind loading with 16 inches on center or 24 inches on center. And then 2x6, you can go a little higher. And then 2x8, you can go a little higher. And so it is a situation of it's conventional framing for a residential home with 8-foot or 9-foot top plates. You can get by with 2x4 framing or even going to advanced framing. Yes, you're using less wood, which for insulation purposes, the reason they call it advanced framing is to try and break that up and reduce the thermal breaks and making the wall assembly itself more energy efficient by using less wood, which then provides more insulation and those thermal breaks. So it is interesting because I've had that before where people have commented like, oh, it's 2x4 construction, that's cheap. And it's like, no, it's not cheap.
It's an energy code thing. It's a depth thing.
Yeah. It's
an
energy
wall assembly thing. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. You're not gaining anything significantly going from 2x4 to 2x6 in the structural standpoint. So just clarification on that. But yeah, there is still some stigma to it because people assemble. What I started with was when I say manufactured construction, knowing that people immediately go, well, manufactured, and they immediately think the homes they see on the side of the road as they're driving, filling a parking lot for sale as they're driving down. And that's not the situation.
It's so funny too. If you look at those manufactured homes that they're building now are pretty trick. You would not know the difference if there was concrete poured around them and you went into it. They're virtually the same looking. I mean, they're very high end now. There's some really nice stuff out there.
What's interesting is I remember as a kid seeing manufactured homes and talking with somebody that I knew that did real estate investing. And they were like, no, manufactured homes are a depreciating piece of real estate.
Yeah. Right.
You buy them and they're like throwaways. They last 10, 20 years. You throw them out and you get a new one. And that's not the case anymore. Yeah. That's not the case at all anymore. There is a situation where, as you stated, if you pour a foundation under them, you can perform add-ons to them. I've seen from a manufactured home environment, not manufactured construction, but manufactured home, where it was up to 6 sections that came out for a residence. In the end, it was a 3,000 something square foot house with a garage.
Yeah.
Instead of that house taking months to build out in the field, it was literally trucked in, set on a foundation,
bolted down,
and it was bolted down. They were fully set up and functioning within a week or two. Yeah, so there's a big variance in that aspect. But so yeah, it is interesting. But I think we'll see more and more adoption to it, especially the panelized construction for production builders. There's an extra level of precision, an extra level of care that if they can get their foundations tightened up and the precision tightened up in the foundations, go into a panelized wall assembly environment, really streamlines the process.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. When it's done right, you get it faster, more consistent quality, and fewer late stage headaches. So the perception that's lower quality is absolutely not true with our level of sophistication and technology today. It's actually a higher quality product more consistent. And I think the engineering, and maybe you can answer this, Royal, is when things are panelized and in segments, there might be maybe a little more strapping or a little more hardware, but not enough to warrant it being a downside from an installation practice.
Then there's a whole thing of, are those exterior walls coming out pre-sheathed, or are you still sheathing them in the
I think
field?
most of them are sheathed, aren't they, that I've seen, but maybe you can do both, you know.
You can do both. You absolutely can do both. There's like the company that we already work with, Shawwood, where everything, that's a frame assembly, that those things are pre-manufactured, and everything's very tight tolerances. And so it is a situation of, you've got these tight tolerances on these assembled frame systems that then are being set on these foundations that obviously had to have a lot of precision associated with them to probably set those. So there's lots of different things hitting the market. I love it. I love residential construction in general, but seeing these things that are increasing precision, reducing time, creating entire new framing systems like the Shawwood product, those things are just awesome.
And they can withstand a hurricane and an earthquake, a seismic stuff. With the Shawwood stuff is really the focus, getting through a natural disaster.
They were designed for Japan, where you have much higher. Japan is just it's environmental disaster playground right there, because you do have tsunamis, hurricanes, and high earthquakes. I mean, the largest.
And it's that house that's still standing with nothing missing, and the rest of the place is just like decimated.
Right.
We'll have to get some of the Shawwood folks on here to talk about
awesome
manufactured construction. I think that would be good. So
it absolutely would be awesome too. So, all right. Well, that wraps it up for today. We appreciate everybody listening. If you have questions or ideas for a future podcast, or we'll do a Q&A podcast here one of these days once we get enough questions built up, feel free to send them in to us. You can send them in via any of the social media that you may listen to this podcast on or see our reels on. We always appreciate those. If you have ideas for topics, or if you're somebody in a very creative industry as it relates to residential construction, we always love to have you on as a guest and discuss what you do and what you bring to the market. Otherwise, if you enjoyed the show, please like, subscribe, share with your friends. We look forward to the next one. Have a great day, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.